Well, let's talk to Brendan O'Neill, who's the editor of Spiked Online, about this. Good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia.
Good morning. Now, one of the key things about Batley and Spen is that many people who wouldn't have heard of the constituency, don't know the area, but will have heard the name Batley in recent months. And this, of course, after a teacher was forced to go into hiding, suspended from his job by the head teacher, simply for teaching a lesson, a religious studies lesson, which he ended up with death threats. And for some reason, this issue, which you would think was a pretty big issue, has failed to rear its ugly head in the Batley and Spen by-election. Can you just go back, if you would, and just explain what actually happened with this teacher? And then we'll talk about, why this is bizarrely not a feature of this by-election.
Yeah, it's horrendous, actually, the fact that it's not a feature of this by-election. And what happened is that this school teacher, by all accounts, a very good school teacher, a very decent school teacher, he showed a picture of Muhammad in a religious studies discussion about blasphemy and offense and those kinds of issues. Some parents took offense and words spread, and soon there were mobs of religious fundamentalists at the school gates. And then what happened next was the most shocking thing of all. Virtually the entire educational and political establishment capitulated to the mob. The school suspended the teacher. The political commentariat didn't say very much at all. The teaching unions didn't stand by the teacher with much support. And politicians basically turned away and or looked at their feet. There was this horrendous capitulation and this abandonment of the teacher. And I think it casts a black mark across this country that this actually happened.
Well, indeed, and especially as we would certainly expect to take those death threats seriously, given what happened only last year to Thomas Patey, a French teacher in Paris who was quite literally beheaded because he had done a similar thing in a class in his school.
That's right. This is a very serious situation. This teacher in Batley was subjected to death threats and huge amounts of abuse, to such an extent that he and his young family have now left their home in Batley. They've moved. They're still in hiding. According to the teacher's father, the teacher is crushed. He doesn't know what to do with his life. He feels that his teaching life is over. This is an incredibly serious situation. A man has been hounded into hiding by religious fundamentalists, and people are not speaking up about it. So the fact that this isn't a feature of the by-election in the area in which this horrible event took place, that really needs some analysis. We need to have a reckoning with this situation.
And this is the thing, isn't it? Because there is a very large Muslim community there. Now, of course, no one is in any way saying, just because someone is Muslim, someone would agree with these death threats from Islamist extremists. Absolutely not. However, very conservative with a small c local Muslim population seem to have, not had an issue with this. And it would seem an awful lot in some of the local parties, as you say, haven't had an issue with these death threats. This hasn't been raised, and there have been accusations that actually there's been an awful lot of decision making by the main parties not to talk about this issue so that they don't offend those conservative with a small c voters from certain ethnic minority groups, because they think that would be an unpopular move. Now, this is effectively, to all intents and purposes, kowtowing to the mob, is it not?
Yeah, let's not beat around the bush. The fact that the main parties are not talking about this issue in Batley and Spen is a disgrace. It is a real indictment of how they view issues like freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and the right of teachers, public servants, arguably the most important public servants of all, the right of teachers to teach critical thinking to their kids. That's what's at stake in this issue. And the fact that the main parties aren't talking about it is really, really disgraceful. So what we have is a situation where a teacher has been hounded out of a local area, and the people who want to represent that local area are not saying anything. They have capitulated to the mob. And what we now know is that these parties, the main parties at least, they value identity politics and the politics of grievance more than they value freedom of speech and freedom of conscience and this teacher's safety. That is the choice they've made, whether they know it or not. That's the choice they've made. And I think the voters should bear that in mind.
Absolutely. I do find it absolutely extraordinary that every single candidate has not stood on the same platform and said they condemn this and demand that the teacher has a right to come back and condemn those who've argued against. I mean, genuinely, if you genuinely want to live in a country with those sort of blasphemy laws, then I'm sorry, whether you're born in Britain or you've come to Britain, I don't care whichever, and I don't care whatever colour you are or your politics. I'm sorry, this isn't the country for you. There are plenty of current countries with blasphemy laws, But go and live there. I don't live in certain countries because I don't agree with the laws that they have. This country does not have a blasphemy law. Well, it does now, I suppose, by the back door. Can I also ask you, Brendan, because you and I have talked so many times about lockdown issues. Matt Hancock, of course, ousted as a health secretary. I mean, everyone says he's done the right thing. He didn't do the right thing. He tried to stay. He definitely didn't do the right thing when he hired his lover. Had adultery, committed adultery against his wife. Woke up his 8-year-old to tell him he was leaving his family because he'd been found out by the Sun newspaper. Everything about this whole story is just horrific and horrible and tawdry from start to finish. But he is finally gone. And he has been, let's face it, I mean, the Puritan in chief for the last year and very much pushing lockdown after lockdown after lockdown. Do you think that Matt Hancock's departure bodes well for us not only getting out of this lockdown on the 19th of July, but actually not having lockdown as the default policy come this autumn?
I hope so. I mean, I'm hearing stories that Sajid Javid, his replacement, is a bit of a lockdown skeptic. I'm hoping that's true, and I'm hoping that pushes things in a slightly different direction. You know, as you say, Hancock was the most vociferous enforcer of the rules. He was the one who said that Neil Ferguson should have been investigated by the cops for his sexual affair, and then he does those kinds of things himself. So he's an absolute hypocrite. I wouldn't hold Hancock single-handedly responsible for lockdown, though. For the basic reason that this whole government has failed us over the past year. They've promoted the politics of fear. They've locked us all down, and they haven't considered issues like liberty and the health in relation to other illnesses. And I think the whole government has questions to answer.
Indeed. You know, the first thing I would want to judge Sajid Javid on is do we stop all those adverts telling us that, everyone we see is going to kill us with COVID, and perhaps a few adverts about checking for signs of cancer and getting mental health problems, and also requiring that GPs do see people face to face. Let's actually see, the money being spent on actually making sure that sick people get treated rather than telling everyone that everyone else is a threat to them.